In past lives, I used to work at the Arboretum and I worked at the Museum of Northern Arizona. And how I got interested over 20 years ago in mushroom hunting is I volunteered to be the driver for a day trip that the museum was doing. And I don't know if any of you know Mary Lou Fairweather and what's Ed's last name? Smith? Ed Smith. And he worked for the Nature Conservancy and she worked for the Forest Service, and it wasn't their profession, but they were just really avid mushroom hunters and they liked to share their knowledge. And so we initially learned from them. And then when I worked at the Arboretum, I hosted a weekend mushroom retreat for several years. And we would do forays out at Hart Prairie Preserve. And we chose that location because a lot of the mushrooms we're going to look at, they're associated with specific trees. So if you're in a place where you have a lot of diversity of tree species, you're going to see different mushrooms that grow with them. So like I live out in Kachina, and I'm just going to see the mushrooms that like to their mycelium live off the roots of ponderosa pine trees. But luckily, a lot of the ones we really like to eat and collect, like the ponderosa pine forest. So I know that we have a whole diversity of people here. Some people are brand new. Raise your hand if you're like brand new, maybe you know one or two species, okay? And then ones who've been mushroom hunting for years. So we got just a few of those, okay. So I'm going to be talking more towards the beginning level, and my program today is going to focus on yummy ones we can eat and ones that'll kill us, and not a lot of the ones in between because there's so many different species. But I do encourage you to there are several books. If you're going to get only 2 books, Mushrooms and Truffles of the Southwest by Jack States was written, he was a biology professor at NAU, and it was written specifically for our area. So for example, I always wanted to find morels. We don't get a lot of morels here, but in some years when we do, we get a lot. And so I read this like a novel, like at night when I was in bed, you know, I would read every chapter of it. And one day I just woke up in the spring and we had had a warm, wet spring. And I said, I think that we might have morels this year. And I looked in the book and it said that you could find them around aspens and between 8,000 and 10,000 feet in the leaf litter. And we got in the truck and we went up to, I'm not going to tell you exactly where, because that's the thing. It's sort of like, you know, you don't bring up certain subjects, you know, religion, politics. With a mushroom hunter, you don't ask, where did you find it? The answer will be, you know, on the San Francisco peaks between 8,000 and 10,000 feet. So they will never tell you specifically their mushroom spot unless they're in love with you. So we went to the area where I thought they were going to be, and lo and behold, in the leaf litter with a little bit of snow melting, there were just morels, morels, morels. But maybe we have a year like that once every 5 to 7 years. Would you agree with that? Yes. So, but also if we've had a burn, so like down at the end of Woody Mountain Road where the pocket is, where the fire came up from Oak Creek, there were some morels that came up after the burn over there. Well, and the other one I want to recommend, and David Aurora, who is based in California, and he does a lot of programs. Telluride has an amazing mushroom festival, so if you really get into this and you want to learn more, you might want to attend the Telluride Mushroom Festival. But this is a wonderful book. This is his pocket guide called All That the Rain Promises and More, and it's just a really fun book. And you can look through it later, but it has keys. So when you find a mushroom, you can key it out, you know, doing a dichotomous key. So you're going to be looking for things like the cap color, what kind of gills it has, what color is the stem, is it growing out of a cup underground? You're always going to want to have a knife with you when you're out mushroom hunting. And you know, it's not just cute to have a basket. There's a reason for it. So you don't want to carry a lot of dirt with you. Some people like Nancy carries a brush. I usually just wipe it on my pants, but you can, brush off. If it's a delicate mushroom, probably brushing it is better than wiping it on your pants. And it helps you to see the true color, to key it out. And when you're walking along, the dirt and bugs will fall out. And also, if you have them in a bag, they're kind of banging up against each other, and you don't want to injure them. So if you're walking along, if they're Americans, they'll say, "Oh, are you having a picnic?" If they're Germans, they'll say, "Is there good mushroom hunting around here?" So anyhow, we'll get started. And this is an example of, we do have some Caesar's amanitas here, and I made a spaghetti sauce with these Caesar's amanitas. They're not normally super shiny like that. Those had just been washed. Some of the easy ones and the earliest ones to come out, and folks here said they found some oysters on bear jaw abano. A lot of times they like to grow on cork bark fir, and you'll see them growing in shelves like this on downed logs. And I have an example. So you'll see them growing in groups, shelf-like, on dead trees, and the cap can be white to gray. Even some have found pink, beige. The gills will be white, and they run down the stalk, so they'll go all the way down the stalk. They're not going to stop at a specific point. And if there's not always a stalk, but if there's a stalk, then everything is growing kind of off center, kind of like an ear. And you'll see them growing in groups and masses. Now, the one thing that a lot of people don't like about oyster mushrooms, they can be really buggy. So the flies get to them quickly, and they'll lay their larvae in there. If you don't like maggots, mushroom hunting is not for you. So when you get home, I recommend putting them in the sink with water, and Nancy suggested putting some salt in the water too. And so the bugs will try to get out of the oyster mushrooms in the water. Maybe rinse it again if you don't want your what you're making to be too salty. I don't find that they preserve well, so that's one of the things is when you're out hunting, keep in mind, like, you don't want to get massive amounts of them if you're not going to eat them right away, because these, I would say the only way, and people can chime in if they have another way of preserving them, I would, if I had a lot, I'd saute them up and then maybe freeze the sauteed mushrooms. But the best thing would be to put them in a recipe right away. And something like a stir fry would be ideal for oyster mushrooms. Okay, now this is sort of the holy grail around here. And I know that some people have said that we have a different species here. I don't know if it's been accepted by the scientific community yet, but around the world, where it's known as king bolete and Boletus edulis, but then I know that the one that we have is rubiceps. And has that been accepted in scientific circles? Okay, so you'll hear it, and I recommend if you're getting into this and you're on Facebook, there is an Arizona Mushroom Society, and you can like their page. And what's nice about it is that people will put a picture and say, "Hey, I found Boletus rubiceps." Sometimes they'll just call them rubies. And they'll say, "Oh, I found them near Williams." So at least it gives you like, hey, like, we better get out there soon. They're popping. So I don't have any examples of edulis or rubiceps here, but I do have their cousin, Barosii. And the main difference between them, the edulis, I'll point to it here, it's going to have this sort of brick red cap to it. There are no gills. It's a sponge on the bottom, and it'll have a thick stalk that's white to brown. It's usually kind of bulbous at the bottom, grows under conifers, and it should be popping right about now, which is 3 weeks after the rains begin. Now, a lot of people get them confused with Sewillis, and we brought some examples of Sewillis in. That also has pores or a sponge underneath. But the main thing, Sewillis is also referred to, oh, I just forgot that, slippery jack. Slippery jack is the name of it. And it's really, when it's wet, It's really slimy and it grows under pine, so pine needles are usually stuck on the cap. So when we're hiking along and I think I found a Barosii, but I see pine needles stuck in it, I'm 90% sure it's a Sewillis. And we couldn't, I mean, if you don't mind passing, are you okay passing it around? Okay. You'll see it has the sponge underneath, but the stem is narrow. It doesn't get bulbous at the bottom like you see in the picture here. So, it can be many different colors. So the one I'm passing around is kind of similar to the aspen bolete here, which also is kind of a brick red. But there's another Sewillis that's brown. There are many different subspecies of them. The ones you see most often are kind of a beige or yellowish beige, but there's lots of different colors of Sewillis, but they're always slimy. And some people eat them. They'll peel off the slimy top and then they'll, slice it up and remove all the tubes. And then supposedly the mushroom, it's edible, but they say it's insipid. So it doesn't, I don't know. Do you eat them, Fred? No. It's like, come on, there's other good things to eat out there. But it has the consistency of snails. So I would say if you were serving snails, Nicole, who's French, who serves snails, and you have a vegetarian coming over, you could make a few vegetarian ones with the Sewillis.
Does it absorb the butter or whatever?
Yeah, it would absorb the garlic and butter, so that it would be probably delicious with the garlic and butter. So there we go. We can serve vegetarian snails. Okay, so this is what I was very happy that Nancy found some excellent examples of the Barosii. Are you okay with me passing it around? Okay. She's planning to slice it up and dry. So that one is also delectable. And what happened to the dried ones? I don't know where I have them over here. I'll pass around the dried ones. So the Barosii that we're passing around, that's it dried. And you want it to be really firm to the touch. And you'll cut into it. And if it has a few larva holes in it, it should be fine. And like Fred was saying, that when you dehydrate it, all the little bugs will fall to the bottom of your dehydrator. I say, if you're also worried that there could be some maggots in there, just serve it over rice with a little bit of pepper and nobody will know. You like that one, Larry? Okay, so it's going to have a white cap, no gills that have a sponge underneath, thick stalk, whitish. The stalk should be at least an inch in diameter, across. You'll find it under conifers, mostly ponderosa pine, but you can find it at higher elevations, and it tends to grow in groups. So Nancy was telling me earlier that when they found one, they stopped and looked around because they were looking for shrumps. Those are mushroom humps where the needles are raised up, and a lot of times people will go mushroom hunting with a walking stick, so you don't have to bend over all the time to move the shrump out of the way. And that's where you find, is that where you found the really good ones? They had just popped up and they were under little shrump. And so when you cut the stem off, you can see if it's totally riddled with larvae or if it's looking pretty good. Sometimes you can just cut the stem off and the cap is okay. So Barosii is one that I would recommend. So I always get upset when it's like pouring on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I got to work until Friday, and then it stops. And I'm like, oh no, everything's going to be full of worms by the time I get out there, on Saturday or Sunday. So you kind of want to go right after. And you don't want them hanging around. You want to process them right when you get home, or like within a day. Slice them up as thin as you can, and either put them in a dehydrator. We have kind of a two-step process. So my husband, Bob, will put a big screen in the basement with a fan under it just to like start the drying process, and then we kind of keep the dehydrator going all night to get them totally with no moisture left, and then we'll bag them up. Okay, aspen boletes, and we have some examples. I'm not gonna pass those around. They're starting to turn. They're kind of soft, but what's kind of unusual about them, the cap is kind of this orange brown. It also has the spongy pores on the bottom. The stalk has this scaly look to it, and it can be, this one's fairly narrow, but about an inch, and you'll find it exclusively under aspens. And when you cut into it, it'll turn sort of a purplish gray immediately, but that's fine. The one thing is when you slice it and dehydrate it, it's going to turn black. And it's delicious. It'll be dried black. So you might want to think of the recipes of what you're going to put it in, because it could make stuff look sort of ugly. But if you had like a deep brown gravy, having a little black mushroom in it wouldn't be off-putting. Okay, chanterelles. We don't have them so much around here. I have found some, but when I've gone up to Colorado, like around Telluride, Montrose, we've just found them carpeting the ground, and they grow in clusters. A lot of times you'll find them around rocks, and I have found them high up, about 9,000 to 10,000 feet on the peaks. And the cap is a bright orange yellow. The gills are not, so they have blunt edges, kind of like the veins on your arm if you had really muscular arms. And they kind of branch out, the veins on them, and the gills are going to be the exact same color as the cap. And one of the main things, if you do cut one and you smell it, it smells like apricots. And I think I have mostly found that associated with like Douglas fir or corkbark fir. Have you found much in the way of chanterelles?
Close to town, or relatively close to town, I've almost always found them mixed ponderosa and gamble oak.
Oh, okay. I have found them under gamble oak once, but I don't have a regular spot. Yeah.
We found some last year up in the White Mountains, more towards the
Firs. Okay. Yeah, I've continued to look under oaks since I did find them around gamble oaks, but I think that was a really wet year. But since then I've only a few. But when I went to Montrose, Colorado, they were just like a carpet of them amongst rocks with lichen on them. Okay, so this is the most ubiquitous mushroom. Like if you're going to start out mushroom hunting, this is a good one to start with. I know some people from California have been leery of this, and so I should make a little side note, is when you get to know the mushrooms of your area, you are only an expert in your geographic area. If you go to travel someplace else and you see something that's okay to eat in your neck of the woods, it might not be okay over there. Like I know when I worked at the Arboretum, sometimes there would be Russian ladies who would go and they're picking all the russulas. Well, we have, and I don't know if I might have a picture of a russula later on. I think that in Poland and Russia, theirs are like, you know, that's fine to eat. But we have so many different subspecies. We don't have any russulas that'll kill you, but we have a lot that will make you sick. So with the lobster mushroom, what you have going on here is you have a edible but not delicious white mushroom that is brevipees. Forget the first part of it. Russula brevis. So it's this conical white mushroom that you wouldn't want to eat it until it gets attacked by this orange parasite. So I guess in California there are some poisonous mushrooms that get attacked by a parasite that look like the lobsters. As far as I know, I've never encountered anyone who has found a poisonous mushroom attacked to look like this. So it's always going to have this concave shape to it. And the ones that are good to eat, they should be very firm, like styrofoam, and white, pure white. If they're starting to grow gray, become gray inside, chuck it. You'll find a lot more of them, so don't hold on to that one. So yeah, David Aurora, as I mentioned, he's the author. This is pretty much the Bible. So this is like the scientific book that has real scientific dichotomous keys. And this one is his little fun book. I get the impression he has a really good sense of humor. Am I right? Yes. Okay. So this you'll enjoy reading. These are pages from his book. So there's little explanations and asides. And it shows you right here, this is what the Russula brevis looks like before it's attacked by the parasite. And then it becomes delicious. To some. Some people aren't crazy about it. I find it's best cooked fresh, and I would only saute it and freeze the sauteed rather than, I think it was pretty awful when it was dehydrated and reconstituted. Would you agree with that, Fred?
I haven't tried my dehydrated ones.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, no, I'm not going to bother dehydrating those. It just became very leathery and did not, reconstitute.
You want a nice texture. You want to harvest them while they're white?
So, when I say white, white inside. Okay. White inside. So, like I said, you're out there hunting, you've got your knife, and you're going to cut it off at the base. And you can kind of tell right away when you cut, and a lot of times they've got dirt inside the top of them, and there's a lot of dirt there. And so you cut it off at the base. If that looks pure white, then it might be worth collecting. If you start to see gray or brown in there, then don't bother. And it should feel really firm. And so a lot of people, like maybe when you were helping your mom in the kitchen, she said, don't put the mushrooms underwater, it's going to soak up all the water. Those mushrooms from the store they never came in contact with the rain, and they will soak it up like a sponge. Probably won't taste good in your spinach salad. But these are so filthy, you're going to want to go home and get the sprayer in your sink and just hose those things down. And I even use the scrubber on them, and you just don't want to be eating the dirt. So don't worry about these wild mushrooms, getting them wet if you want to wash them. They were just out in the rain. So don't worry about that. Okay. Yeah, so you're not going to see gills. The gills have been sort of eaten up by this parasite. You want the white flesh, and they're going to be under shrumps. So if you see some orange poking out here and there, and you see a lobster, maybe that one's a little dried out and old, but look for those lumps where you're going to find other ones. Okay, now this Caesar's Amanita. This one we collected for several years before we decided that we were confident enough to eat it, because most of the other mushrooms in the Amanita family are poisonous. Some poisonous to a hallucinogenic way, but not a fun way, like throwing up and you're in the psych ward at the emergency room. So so we'll look at some pictures of those. And then there are some amanitas that are deadly, that will destroy your liver. So this one we heard was really good to eat. And we have a lot of them growing around Flagstaff. And when you start to see them, that usually means the boletes are coming up as well. Now, one of the main things is this beautiful orange color. And these amanitas, they grow like an egg, and there's a veil, they sort of pop through the veil, and it'll have sometimes it'll still have a piece of the veil on top of it. So you can see here where it's kind of popping out of its egg. And they very distinctively have a orange cap. If it's been sitting out in the rain, that's going to fade. It'll be a light orange. It should be bald with just a white patch, not little warts. The gills should be bright yellow. The stalk is rather thick, and it's not swollen at the base. They grow in groups under pine trees, and you do not want to confuse it with Amanita muscaria, which, depending if it's been out for a while, it can look really similar. So if it's been in the rain, it can fade. So this used to be that orange that you see there, but it's been out in the rain. And this is a muscaria that might have been bright red, but it's been out in the rain, and so it's starting to look orange. So they look really similar. But if you look at the gills, do you see a big difference here?
White.
Yes. So the one that is okay to eat has orange gills, yellow orange gills. And the one that'll make you ill or psychotic has white gills. Now, supposedly, this is the whole Santa Claus and flying reindeers come from that. You can Google it. I'm not going to get into it. Okay. So now, after we were so excited, we were finally, confident enough to eat these. We're not really that crazy about them. They're fishy. So, and I have one that's rotting there that's really smelling like fish. And I make a risotto with shrimp that I'll put that in. And so that's a nice complement since the mushrooms are kind of fishy themselves. Okay, so that's what the other one, the Amanita muscaria or fly agaric, that's what it looks like. And we get excited when we see those because we usually see the boletes, the king boletes or rubies around the same places where these are growing up. And they're just so beautiful. I think they're the most beautiful mushrooms. So that one has a bright red to orange cap scattered with warts, white gills, white stalk. It's going to be bulbous at the bottom. And they're found in groups, pine, spruce, and it refers to it as toxic. Now, supposedly, reindeer eat those. And then people like shaman in Lapland will gather the urine from the reindeer who've eaten them, and then that will get you high. But you know what? That's too much work. Okay, death cap. So these are another couple of amanitas, and I didn't collect any. Did you see any when you're out there? This one here, that's kind of yellowish. Okay, so folks can come down here. And Nancy did a nice job of trying to keep the bottom of it's referred to as a vulva, intact. Okay, cap pale green, greenish yellow, or olive brown, fading to tan or paler with age. Gills are white in all of the stages, has a sac at the base of the stalk, found in groups in forests, under trees, deadly. A single mushroom can be fatal. Now, I've heard stories of Italians in California who were trying to collect, they like in a salad, when they're in the egg stage, I think it's called ovoli salad, and so they have mistaken this for a mushroom that they're familiar with back in Italy. So that's an example of, if you're in a totally different continent, don't be too confident with your mushroom hunting skills. Destroying angel. So that's another amanita that will kill you. Maybe not immediately, but I guess it starts to liquefy your liver. The cap is pure white, white on the edges. Gills and stalk are white, sac or cup at the base, always growing near trees, especially oak, and it's deadly poisonous. So,
Apples in California, they have a distinctly allergen, chlorine, bromine smell.
oh, okay. Yeah, and so, a lot of times, well, I've had questions like, if animals can eat it, can we? I saw a deer eat it. I saw a squirrel eat it. No, just because they're eating it. And who knows if they're still alive after they took a bite out of it. But there are some that deers and squirrels eat that just aren't tasty for us. So I wouldn't, yeah, and if something smells bad, it probably is not going to taste good. But we have an example of this Pholiota here that smells really good. It smells like garlic, and supposedly Basque sheep herders ate it. But in David Aurora's books, it says it causes gastrointestinal problems. So I'll stick with the garlic and the regular mushrooms. Okay, so I'll just quickly mention some other common mushrooms. These cap ones over here, we don't collect them to eat them, but they're fun, especially if you have kids around or adults you want to amuse. Yeah, that's a cup fungus. So if you go up really close to it and you blow on it right in there and you move away, it'll take a second, and then the spores will make like a puff of smoke. It'll be like a delayed reaction. It'll just like shoot out its spores. So it's like fun with mushrooms. And I say, if you can bring a kid with you, they're lower to the ground, so they see more stuff, and it's fun. It's like going on an Easter egg hunt. Oh, this isn't the greatest picture, but these are wood ears. So I don't know if anyone has ever had Chinese food that has wood ears in it. They're supposed to have really good medicinal properties, and they're usually growing. It's like you see the back of the ear from the top, and this is on corkbark fir, on downed trees, and I'll tell you exactly where I found a lot of these is on the Humphreys Trail, where when you first started, you see so many dead, fallen over corkbark firs and spruce, and so you'll see them on the logs, and you want them to be pretty firm. They can get really jelly-like if they're gooey. They're no good anymore. In a real hot and sour soup, there's usually sliced up wood ear in there. It's kind of has a jelly-like texture. That's very good. Russulas. So this is what I was saying before, that a lot of Polish and Russians will go out in the woods and they'll just go crazy over the russulas. There are many different species. I recommend looking at All That the Rain Promises and more. There's one in particular whose name is Russula emetica. So you can tell from the name that it is going to make you throw up. So you really need to know how to key that out. And even the ones that are edible, they're not considered to be that delicious. I know that a lot of Polish people, they'll pickle them. So they can have them. I'm not interested in collecting them myself. But I guess if I had a good recipe, it might be good. Okay, so and I have examples of coral fungus here, and they're pretty cool to look at. They look like coral from under the sea. It has been reported that they will cause, they have a laxative effect. So I'll just leave those in the woods. And then this one here that's a little, is that a club coral? That's considered to be sweet. I've never eaten it. Have you eaten it, Fred? Okay. Is it good? Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know how you I don't know how you prepare them. Okay. Okay. Well, we have found them, but we've never eaten them. But I'm not a dessert person anyway, so. Okay, and then, this is when I was in Colorado, and those are all, it's not a great picture, but those are all chanterelles. There are a lot of chanterelles to be had. So it's a fun thing. It's hard when you're traveling, if you're just in a hotel room and you're out and you're like, there's all these mushrooms, but I can't do anything with them. So get yourself an Airbnb if you're going to go mushroom hunting where you've got a kitchen. And, as I said, you could just soak them, hose them down, make sure you get the bugs out of them, get the dirt off of them. And chanterelles dry pretty well also. So this is step one of our dehydrating process, just to make them smaller so we can fit more in the dehydrator. People also pickle mushrooms. I've seen people jar them in oil. I haven't eaten the mushrooms. I think that would be more of like an Italian way of doing it. And then freezing. I would usually saute first and then freeze. And then you can add them to recipes later. And that's pretty much what I have for the presentation. And I recommend that you get yourself some guidebooks and just get comfortable with a few species. Maybe, follow the Arizona Mushroom. There's the Arizona Mushroom Society page, and then there's the Arizona Mushroom Forum, which I think is part of what they put out there. And so there are people who will take a picture and then put it up there and say, identify please. So that is pretty hard. And because there's so many things you have to look at. And also I have had people send me a text message with a picture and say, is this good? I'm about to eat it. And it's like, a deadly amanita, and I don't have them in my contacts, and I'm calling them who are you? Don't do it. So, just get to the point where you're really comfortable and you've keyed everything out, and start with, of course, the lobsters are pretty obvious. I think the boletes, the only thing that you might confuse them with is the sewillis, which isn't going to kill you, but if it's spongy and slimy, then it's probably the sewillis and not the bolete. And then little by little, you can expand your repertoire. You'll see when you come down here, I have a lot of things that I've flagged in my book that I haven't even mentioned to you. Like one that we always look for this time of year is a cauliflower mushroom, and those are really amazing. So hopefully you'll get confident with a few species, and as you collect stuff, take it home, key it out, then you can keep building your repertoire. So, yeah.
Can you say anything about any groups here in Flagstaff?
Well, the Arboretum has continued to put on some mushroom programs. So I would go on the Arboretum site, but like the Arizona Mushroom Society that's based in Phoenix, they do come up to Flagstaff for their forays. And that was one of the first ones that Ed Smith had said to us, oh, shaggy manes, you can't confuse them for anything else. We had a conversation about shaggy manes earlier. And they usually grow along the side of the road, and they have kind of a conical shape, and they're a little bit like scrofulous looking. They tend to be really dirty because they like to grow in disturbed areas. They'll come up out of gravel or sand, and it's really hard to clean them. And then you gotta cook them right away because they will start to putrefy and get all inky, and they're in the same family with inky caps. So inky caps have some chemical properties that interact with alcohol. So if you're making something like a spaghetti sauce, and then you want to have a glass of wine with it, you could end up with an upset stomach. So I'm not a big fan of shaggy manes. They are, pretty easy to identify. Like there's some things they're good to eat, or the flavor's pretty good. Like I haven't talked about, there's so many different species. Agaricus. So agaricus is the species that portobello mushrooms and champignon de Paris, the little white mushroom, button mushrooms you buy at the grocery store, those grow out in nature. But they're also related to other agaricus mushrooms that will make you sick. And so Ed Smith, that we learned from, he said, I mean, he has found some out in the wild and said they were really delicious. But he said, if it's the same as the one in the grocery store, and I know the one in the grocery store is good to eat, then I'm not going to risk, those won't kill you, but they will make you violently ill. They call them the lose your lunch bunch. And he's got some really lovely, fun pictures about that. Yeah. And I should mention that morels, they come up in the spring. So everything that I've talked about, I didn't even mention morels because I was focusing on monsoon mushrooms. But they have a very distinctive shape to them, and they come up in the spring as the snow is melting. So, any other questions? And then I invite folks to come down and look. Yeah.
What's your favorite to eat?
Well, I would say the best are it seems like maybe some things have ended up back there. Yeah, like the ones that are dried, because the boletes, the fact that you get a whole bunch of them and you can process them and dry them, and keep them for years, and they're just so delicious. And like I said, that is the same thing as porcini, or if you're German, they're Steinpils. So they're very well loved throughout the world. And I mean, I can take something like a pork chop and then just make an amazing sauce by throwing in some of the dried porcinis. So, just sauteing it in the pan and then reconstituting a bunch of the dried, crushed up. So you don't have to worry about slicing them so perfectly, because you're probably going to end up crushing them anyway when you make your sauce, and then just kind of reconstituting it, and maybe with some sour cream, salt, and pepper. And then you got this amazing sauce with the pork chop. So I love those. Yes. And what I was starting to say earlier, if you are going to send somebody a picture, like put something in for scale. Make sure it's like a really high quality picture that you send them. Maybe they're opening it up on their computer, not just on their phone. Yeah, so if you send it as a text, they're not going to be able to open it up on their computer. But, I would say like an etiquette, if you did want to put it up on the Mushroom Forum, people seem to appreciate it better if you tried to make an effort yourself first to identify it and say, I keyed this out and I think it's a blah, blah, blah. Can you confirm that for me? And maybe get a picture from the top and a picture from the bottom. But yeah, like anything, if you made a little bit of an effort on your end, people are pretty good about chiming in, saying, yeah, that's, and make note of where you found it. So, if you said I found it on such and such a kind of a tree or under that tree, so you'll provide people with that information. Yes. Well, I definitely don't pick the ones that are deadly poisonous and carry them around. Oh, and that's a really good question that you have there. So if you did want to collect a whole bunch of stuff to take home and key out, bring some paper bags. So like these little lunch bags that Nancy brought. I just have like little Bookman's bags or whatever. You might want to sequester the ones that are questionable. So like I might have my good mushrooms to eat in here, and then I feel like keying out these questionable ones in the bag. And I like the paper bag, number one, because like sometimes people will bring me stuff that's in plastic. It is giving off moisture and it's deteriorating really fast. So it might be hard by the time you get home. You won't be able to tell the color or anything anymore because it's already started to deteriorate. The paper bag soaks up the moisture. And then if you don't have time that night, maybe you did on a Saturday, you headed to a party, you feel like checking it out the next day, put it in the fridge, close it up so your spores don't get all over your fridge. Or keep it in the paper bag in the fridge, and then it'll stay pretty fresh for the next day when you can key it out. Yeah. Oh, that is, I did not even talk about spore prints, but when you're keying stuff out, that is one of the characteristics you're looking for, the color of the spores, especially with the agaricus, because there are, like, I've seen beautiful agaricus coming up in my yard, and Oh, when you're doing your spore print, I recommend putting it on a magazine. Because if you put it on white paper and the spores are white, you're not going to see anything. And if you put it on dark paper and the spores are dark, so if you get a magazine or a newspaper, then you'll be able to see, are they brown, are they white, are they green? So the agaricus that usually comes up in our front yard, it drops green spores when I do a print. So you cut off the stalk and leave it overnight on the paper. And the green ones are definitely like when they say green around the gills, those are the ones that make you upset, like vomit, yeah. So I recommend that if you have questions, you want to look at some other mushrooms we have here. There's even bract fungus to come on down. And we have some people here like Nicole and Bob and Nancy who offered to answer questions. Sounds like Fred might be able to answer some questions too. If you want to, and if there was, this is not, but people use it, they call it an artist's conch, and you can kind of like inscribe things in it, and it dries, and yeah, kind of make designs in it. Yeah, and if things ended up at the top, if you want to bring them back down, that'd be great. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.